What's up, everybody? Welcome back to How It's Done. Today we got another good one for you. Got home today, the garage door wouldn't open. Came in and looked and found this. The spring has snapped. You might have two springs, you might have one. My garage door is aluminum with the steel frame. So it's technically considered to be a lightweight garage door. So they only have one spring on it. I'm going to go back with two just for the sake of redundancy. This way, if one breaks, the garage door will still open on its own and we can still get stuff out of the garage. Garage doors are heavy. That's why you have the springs. So if I go up to it right now and try and lift it, it ain't moving. With two hands, I might be able to get it to budge a little bit, but you're not picking this up right now. If I had a car in the garage, I'd be stuck until we get this repaired. So we're going to go back with two. I'm going to show you how that's done. We're also going to teach you how to take the measurements on the spring to figure out what size spring you need to order to replace it. And most importantly, for something like this, we're going to go over all the safety practices that you definitely need to observe if you are going to attempt this yourself. It is very dangerous. You could pop yourself in the head. The springs are under a lot of tension when you're winding them. Very dangerous. So first of all, if you're not 100% comfortable doing this, do not attempt to do this yourself. And quick disclaimer, this video is for educational and informational purposes only. Any risk that you take on by doing it yourself is yours and yours alone. Let's get after it. All right, so first thing you got to do is figure out what size springs you actually have. So there's three different measurements you want to take basically, and that's from the spring end to end. I know what you're thinking, it popped, it may have moved, it didn't. This is where it's tightened down. As long as you haven't gone and loosened these bolts, you'll be fine getting the measurement, because what's happened is the tension on this spring has actually been released and it pulled itself looser. So we're going to go ahead and take that measurement, and then we're going to count back 10 coils and take that measurement, and then we're going to do another 10 so that we have a total of 20, and we'll take that measurement. And what that does is that helps us confirm that there's not any gapping like this. Now I like to go from this point in, because from here you can see it's a little bit cockeyed. Same thing right here. It's a little bit off, so you could get a little bit off of the measurement. So go ahead, grab our tape measure, see if we can do this with one hand, and we'll count in 10. I'm eyeballing it right now, but 10 is going to hit me right at about 2.5, and then 20 should be 5 if the math is right. Yeah, 20 is 5. Okay, so we got 10 is going to be 2.5, and 20 is going to be 5, and then distance from here here, got just over 31, so we're gonna call it 31. Now you can Google garage door spring sizing chart. Sometimes you'll actually see a color code used on the ends of these. The ones that I'm going to be putting back and ordering will have the color on it. It's going to be gold because this is that size, but we'll get into that in just a minute. I will also leave a link in the description where you can find that sizing chart, something very convenient to go through and just pull up. So we got the sizing chart pulled up on the computer here. As you can see, you get the different color code on the side here. This is the wire gauge or the wire size. So for 10, it's going to be 2.5 inch, which is what we got. And then for 20, we got 5. If you got something different, just match that up with the chart here. Zoom in a little bit so you can make the best of that use. You could go crazy and go to 30, 40, 60, and 80, but 10 and 20, typically you're going to get it figured out pretty quickly. So we're going to go ahead and order some with the gold ends, and we'll get back to you once these come in. Since I am adding a second one, I'm ordering a set of 2 new bearings for this as well. Just because if I'm replacing one, I might as well replace both. So, yep, gonna go ahead and order that on Amazon, Home Depot, Lowe's, something like that. We'll see where the best prices are. All right, so we got the new springs here. Went ahead and bought 2 new bearings for this as well. Go ahead and open this up. Let's see what these guys look like. Of course, the box is completely sealed. What I mean about the gold coloring on them, that'll help indicate to you what size the springs are. You might also have some lettering on them. One is going to be the left side, one is going to be for the right. If it's not marked on here, you'll normally have a coloring over here, which actually, as I say that, I realize it does. So the red is the right side, the black is the left. And what that means is right hand spin, left hand spin on the coils. So this one with the red, I believe actually goes on the left, and then the one with the left hand windings goes on the right when you're looking at it like this. So let's go ahead and set up some safety precautions here to make sure I don't hurt myself. And one other thing, when you're buying these kits, if you don't do this professionally, you're not going to have these tensioning rods. So always buy a kit that comes with the tensioning rods, because using a piece of rebar or sticking a stick in there is not a great idea. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is kind of a safety precaution. So we're going to take a pair of vice grips. We're just going to clamp down on the garage door there, right above one of the rollers, so that it doesn't raise up on us at all. We've also gone through and pulled this to disengage the rail. And then last, we're going to reach up here and actually unplug the garage door opener, so that if by chance this catches a button from somebody else's garage, it doesn't accidentally try to open, or if someone walks into the garage and presses the button, it doesn't activate while we're working on the springs. Again, it's not connected, but we don't want to add any additional risk. So we'll unplug that and go from there. If you're removing the spring and it's got tension on it, you're going to want to loosen it over there first. Remove the tension with these rods. What you'll do is you'll stick a rod in here, stick a rod in here. As you loosen it, the rod will lower to this. You'll stick the one in the top. Basically the reverse of what I'm going to do to tension them up. But I'm going to go ahead and just use a socket to loosen this up. And we'll take this completely off. Alright, so for these square ones, what you can do is you can use a, I think it's a 10-point socket that we've got in here. I forget exactly what that is. Or you can just get a square head, or you could get a socket that fits this. This is a 7/16. So just want to loosen it. Same thing on the bottom one. To the point where that can turn. And then what you're going to find oftentimes is that there's some little burrs on here that prevent this from sliding out past it super easily. That one actually went pretty well. Sometimes you'll need to get a piece of sandpaper and just work it, and that will easily get the little burrs off of there. We may run into that problem on that end with those set screws, but we'll see what happens when we get there. So for these two ends, the wire actually already came off, so I'm just going to try and feed it over through the side for now. And again, we're going to take our socket, feed it on there. just loosen it. I think this whole thing should spin freely on there. I think it's starting to. Like that, and then this can just slide down like that. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. And in order to get this spring off, we'll just slide this bar back, take that end piece off, and then we'll slide these springs off. Alright, so once you've got these guys loosened up and taken off, you can slide them off the end here. This whole piece can slide back and forth. You can slide it out of this bearing. And I've got this pretty much all the way against the wall. So I'm going to take this bearing. We're going to feed it inside here. And again, this is the one with the left side thread winding on the spring. And we are going to we're going to feed the bearing on along there first. And then we're going to try the spring, since we don't have a lot of room to work with. And fortunately, with these not wound up, we have a little bit of play to them. So now the trick is just going to be lining up the end with. There we go. Alright. We'll feed that along there. We'll put the cable guide back on. It keeps wanting to slide out the center guide, but push that on in there. Push this down a ways. And I would recommend you pull the cable guide in a little ways, because now we're going to have to push that side this way as much as we can. Alright, so same thing for this side. We're going to take that off. We're going to actually remove the spring on this one, as well as the plastic bearing that it came with. We're replacing those with actual metal bearings. And like we learned last time, on the other side, put the bearing on there first. Again, making sure that the little inset piece is here, because that's going to be the guide that sits inside of it. And then we're going to take the spring. Do if you're having trouble lining it up, like I appear to be having, you can reach inside and touch the end of the pipe with your finger and kind of guide it into place. And then get it in there. Cable guide back in. When you put the cable guides in place, you always want these set screws facing toward the center of the garage door. And that's going to happen a lot because those guides in the center, it's only really held in place by the 2 bolts that hold the springs in place. So don't be overly concerned if that happens. It'll go back in place. All right, so it doesn't really matter which side you do first in terms of the cable guides. I like to get them finger tight first, and then you basically tighten it until it bottoms out right there. Alright, so now it's starting to dig into the tube. So what I like to do is another full turn. So that's half a turn. Sometimes it's a bit wonky because of how these square ones end up. It's about 1/8 of a turn. And then there should be the rest. Alright, now for this one, same thing. We'll do just a little bit of a turn there. It's going to happen. Half a turn. Turn in a little bit more. There we go. Alright, so now let's try and keep that in place as best we can. Now we're going to put the cable back in. And all this is, it's got a little piece here. You just push it in the side and it locks in place. And it's got the little rail that it feeds into. And then I'm going to get it good and tight. And what I'll do is put vice grips on here to keep that held tight. Because we don't want this rail spinning as we're tightening up the other side. You'll see what I mean in just a second. Ready?
Yep.
Alright, so same thing over here. Only kind of backwards. On the last one we tightened it up first and then put the cable in. This one we're putting in the cable. Now we're going to twist this so that the cable's nice and tight in place. And that's in place. We're going to tighten these down. And that's why I put the vice grips on there, because otherwise I'd have to be holding this steady and tight as I'm doing this. And there's no way to tighten up these nuts, or I'm sorry, these bolts, while I'm holding it with both hands. So that should do it. Tight on both sides. Good. So, like I said with the bearings, this is going to also act as kind of like a spacer. That's why it's got that little lip on the inside. You just slide the springs on over. We'll take the bolts that we took off. Put the nut on the other side. Same thing on the bottom. Bolt through. And sometimes you just have to get it barely through in order to be able to get this nut on with the spring in the way. So that's what we're doing here. This would be a lot easier with an extension, but I don't have one with me right now, so we're just gonna do it like this. Alright, so now that the vice grip's in place down there, we've got everything tightened up here. This is not gonna spin because of the vice grip down there, so now we're gonna tension up these springs. You want a full turn for every foot of door. So this right here is a quarter turn, and then you're going to add 2 quarter turns on top of that. So for a 7-foot door, we're going to do 28 quarter turns plus 2 turns, so a total of 30. So that's 1, 2, and this is where using the rods that they came with come into play because they fit really snug in there. They're not going to pop out. Don't try using a screwdriver or anything because you're going to run into problems. You'll also notice that my body and my face and torso is positioned outside of the range of this spin because if by chance this pops loose and springs and launches something back, I don't want to be in its path. There's a lot of tension here. And there's my 30. All right, so now that we got our 30 turns on there, go ahead and tighten this up in place. I'm just going to snug them up by hand first. With my 7/16 socket. And then go ahead and put a full turn and a half on this. Now we got that, we'll go ahead and remove this one. Can be a little bit tricky since the take off our clamps. You'll notice I did not tighten the spring on the right side because, like I said, that's there for redundancy. Since we matched the exact size of the spring from what came out, we cannot use 2 at once. Sure, there's a formula out there to downsize your springs so that you can use 2 at once, but the idea behind this is if this spring ever goes out, all I've got to do is go up here and wind this one and the garage door will work. And I don't really need to order a whole nother spring. I've got one there already. Since I was ordering the parts, just ordered them. We're good. Anyway, so we remove the clamp from the rod up here. Go ahead and remove the clamp from the garage door. And now we're just going to open this by hand and see that it's easy to open by hand. And if that's the case, we're not going to put any undue stress on the garage door opener. Super easy to open by hand. If you underwind them, meaning you don't wind them enough, they're going to be hard as you get about mid-level. They're going to be hard to open. This is pretty easy. If you overwind it, it's going to want to shoot itself back when it gets to that point. And this, again, doesn't do that. So we did a pretty good job. You can take off 2 windings or add 2 windings as needed and make that work. But this seems to be pretty good. So let's go ahead and plug in the garage door opener. And we'll re-engage this guy. And we'll see how well this works. All right, garage door is plugged back in. And now
would say this works great.